Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and in today's video I want to talk about the point of view of a pilot, and you can take this one quite literally, since I want to talk about where you would normally sit in your aircraft and how you can influence that. So, the default views that developers set in their add-on aircraft are not always optimal. For example, if we look into this A330 over here, then we can see by looking down that we don't really sit in the middle of the seat, but somewhat to the right of the seat. Now, you know that with the WASD keys you can move around in the cabin and you can kind of correct that point of view like this somehow, but if you would now be zooming around doing some stuff in your aircraft, and if you generally were to do something and then use the button to reset your point of view to return to the original one, then that setting is reset and you are once again sitting in an incorrect position. Now, first of all, let's talk about what is a correct seating position. So, airplane manufacturers design seating positions so that the pilot will have the most optimal point of view. Those positions are based on the angle of the nose of the aircraft, which may cut off visibility. They're based on the visibility of your panels and your instruments, and they're of course also to a certain extent based on the position of your flight controls, so that for example you can always reach the stick correctly, that you have the rudders in a good position, even though some aircraft do allow you to change the rudder position like the A330 does. Now, those points of view do differ a little bit, and I want to provide a couple of examples of it. Basically, for any modern Airbus aircraft, you have this little indicator in the strut between the two cockpit windows. Now, this, especially if we look at it from the side, consists of three balls, and you have the two red balls, and then you also have the white one. Now, as you can see, if we move into the default seating position here, the white ball is still visible behind the red one, and that's not supposed to be. So when you are in the correct seating position, you will only see the red ball, and the white ball will be completely hidden behind the red one. So what can we do? Well, we can move a little bit to the side here and get ourselves in somewhat a position like this, where now the white ball is pretty much completely hidden behind the red one. Now, as you can see looking down, that coincides with sitting a little bit to the left of the seat over here, but if we look in the front, you can see that you nicely got the primary flight display in the middle in front of you, and that you can basically see everything in the cockpit in a good manner. Now, Boeing has a similar system in the 777, where you've got a little X drawn in front of you, and you got to adjust the top of the control column to pretty much just touch that white cross that you have drawn in front of you. The 737 is a little bit more difficult, and overall it is worth mentioning that I find it very, very hard to get a realistic seating position in pretty much any flight sim. That applies to the A330 that we see over here as well. Why is that? Because according to the manuals, you're supposed to be able to see the top of the glare shield as well. So technically speaking, I have to move up to something like this, and indeed this is round about what it looks like when I'm looking outside of the aircraft in the real world. So you do definitely see the top of the glare shield here and the lower part of the window. The only problem in flight simulation is you are not even seeing the sky at all, and your instruments are cut off as well, which they most definitely are not in the real world. So that's a general problem with the point of view that I do find in flight simulator aircraft. That basically, even though they all say they have the cockpit geometry correct, and as far as I'm aware, the A330 was even 3D scanned, and if we just go into some general position over here like this one, then it really doesn't look like it would be off or anything, but it just doesn't seem to be 100% correct in terms of when you're looking outside. Now, why am I telling you all this? Basically because the default point of view that you get in a lot of aircraft is incorrect. For example, over here you can see that the indicator in the front doesn't line up correctly, and there are ways to fix this. Now, I told you about the problem where if you move the view around then use your button to return to the standard view quickly, it just brings you back into that incorrect preset point of view. But you can change this preset point of view, and let me show you how. So you go into the settings, and then you go down into the camera settings, and down here you have these controls over here. So you got the height, the horizontal position, and the zoom. We'll talk about the zoom in a few moments, but let's start with the horizontal position. That one changes your point of view to the left if you move it to something less than 50, or to the right if you move it to something more than 50. To show you an extreme example, if we set this one to 80, you can see that all of a sudden our point of view is located somewhere over here. And even if I'm now moving myself around the aircraft and press the button to return, it brings me back to this point of view. So you can use this in order to adjust your default point of view to better match the standard aircraft. Let's go ahead and have a little look what we can do then for the A330. You go to the camera settings, and then you pick something around 48 in the A330-300, which now brings us into this nice point of view. PFD in the middle, triple indicator, almost pretty much hidden, sitting in the middle of the seat, as you can see down here by the pedal adjustment lever being in the middle of that part of the table as well. And that's your more correct point of view. But let's have a look at another example, because the main view of a captain's seat is often still kind of okay, but let's move around a little bit. Let's use our camera menu and say we want to fly from the first officer's seat. Then we select pilot, co-pilot, and you can see this is now completely incorrect. Like, yeah, we are somewhat on the middle over here, but you can't see anything outside. And look at how low we are sitting over here. So let's go ahead and correct that. First things first, I want the PFD in the middle. So let's go back to, no, not you, but you. Why are they using the same symbol? Symbol. Alright, so let's go over here and just bring ourselves back into that 50% position. Then, let's save this. And the next thing we notice is that the zoom is just totally weird. It's so far inside, whereas the normal pilot point of view is zoomed much further out. And we can change this. So let's once again go back into those settings, and you will see that we have the zoom level down here. And you can see that, for example, if I move this out to 40 now, 50 is standard, if I move this to 40, all of a sudden the default zoom level is a lot better. Now the only problem that's left is that we're sitting much too low, and we can once again correct that one as well. So let's go down into the camera settings and take the height over here, and that changes the default height. So just to show you an extreme, if we move this to 70, all of a sudden we're sitting here, and honestly, that is a lot better than what we had previously. Now, I may want to lower this again a little bit. Something about 60 seems to work pretty well. Yes, of course, I played with this before I started recording the video. So something like 60 works pretty well on the A330 over here. And if you look at that, all of a sudden you have a co-pilot point of view that pretty much matches what you had in the captain's point of view by default. Now, I do hope that Asobo is eventually going to improve these a little bit, but for the time being, this is a very good compromise to just move your point of view around and load up a proper flight. Now, especially the zoom setting is one that I use a lot. So you can see I had it on 50 by default, which works quite fine with the A330. But if we take, for example, the Phoenix A320 series, which is really, really zoomed out by default, then I would just move this to about 70, and that works very well to give you a proper, decent point of view, quite similar to what we had at 50 in the A330. So different developers do set this up differently, and using these numbers, you can kind of correct for those default settings that developers make with their aircraft. Now, again, for us, something like 40 works quite well for the first officer point of view in the A330. 70 works pretty well in the Phoenix Airbuses. I use 60 in the PNDGs, and that way you just get, let's call it consistent level of zoom. What do I want to see in my level of zoom, in my default level? Well, of course, PFD, ND. I want the ECAM, respectively ICAS and Boeing. Basically, I want the engine instruments so that I know how much thrust I'm setting. And then I want to be able to see outside as well. That's especially important for the approaches, where you quickly scan from looking at the instruments inside to looking at the visual picture outside. And what you see on screen right now is basically my default point of view that I would have in the real world as well. Anything outside of this is going to fall outside your primary field of vision, so you would have to look there consciously by looking around like you can do in the sim as well. Well, my friends, and that's what I can offer you in today's video. Let me know if you are using any different tricks to control your point of views. I certainly find these quite useful, and I do most certainly hope that more developers are going to put more emphasis on a correct default point of view in their add-on aircraft so that this eventually hopefully becomes obsolete. But for the time being, thank you very much for watching. As always, I hope you liked this one. Be sure to leave your comment and feedback in the video description below. And until then, thank you very much for watching. As always, like, comment and subscribe, and I'm really looking forward to see you guys again on the next one.